So we should move on to the next story, which is the British government targets trans community with new toilet rules. Um, so, according to Pink News, sources say that the UK government intends to announce new rules mandating separate bathroom stalls for men and women as part of the government's ongoing attempts to legislate trans people out of the public sphere. Um, what fucking interests me most about this is that these bathrooms are specified as being, quote, entirely self contained, with basins and hand dryers. Sorry. End quote. So we're not on about like a large bathroom which has like rows of bathroom stalls and then like a sink and like a joint sink or whatever. We are on about those fucking self-contained bathrooms where it's just a toilet, one basin, and a hand dryer. Um, and they have to be gendered. They are mandated to be gendered. And it's like, why? What? Like, even if you're arguing that trans people are a threat, or people pretending to be trans people are a threat, which is just code for trans people are a threat, if you're going to force institutions to have single occupation bathrooms, why do they need to be gendered at all? You can only get one person in. Like, they're thick ass stores. They're not flimsy bathroom stalls or anything. They're gonna have good bolts on them. So it's just absolutely, it's just absurd. It reminds me there are restaurants near where my mother lives. There's I think it's a Harvester there, and like they have like individual like toilets. Like they're all individual. They're all separate, but they're still gendered. It's like, why? That makes no fucking sense. Out of all bathrooms, I know it doesn't make sense. Like, unisex bathrooms are not a danger. All the research says they're not a danger. They don't increase violence. They don't do any of that. But like, what? It's just it shows what is actually clearly intended here. It's not about safety. It's about excluding trans people from public spaces. Now, we actually touched on this before, and we noted at the end of last year that this was going ahead because this is the result of a government review titled "Technical Review on Increasing Accessibility and Provision of Toilets for Men and Women," which was announced in November of 2020. So we mentioned it back then. I noted how it was like part of the greater trans hysteria that's being created. They claimed it wasn't about punishing trans people, but that was quite clearly bullshit. They were just saying that, unisex bathrooms are making cis women feel uncomfortable, even though the actual public statistics on that show the exact opposite. So it's really been quite alarming. We knew this was coming, and now it seems that they finally reached a point where they are going to go ahead and they are going to instill these new policies. Those behind the review have been making claims about the need for separate gender toilets as a means of safeguarding women. Yeah, as with similar claims made in the US as far back as 2015, as part of an attempt to fight trans rights, we had the Houston Bill. HB, I forgot what number it was, House Bill, and that really kicked off the whole bathroom craze. It was an attempt to attack trans people, and there's no evidence that gender neutral bathrooms have any negative impact on anyone. Again, certainly not the self-contained gender neutral bathrooms. Though the trans community will certainly suffer under these new regulations, this will make it easier for bigots to target and police binary trans people because whilst their access is protected under the 2010 Equalities Act, lack of staff training and public awareness will lead to public violence. We saw the LGBT plus community does not trust the police, okay? And they have reasons for that. So what happens if a cis person sees a trans woman enter, a women's bathroom, or a trans man enter a man's bathroom and decides to report it to police? what happens then? And that's if it even goes to police. Like if it's a public area, like a shopping mall or something, it might just be basic security guards, and the chances of them having comprehensive LGBT plus education are next to none. And I don't like doing this, but since some people don't like being concerned about what happens to other people unless it impacts them, this is also going to hurt any cis person who does not fit the stereotypical appearance of a man or a woman. We've seen this in the US with the rash of, people chasing very often lesbians, but sometimes just, people who don't have a typical gendered presentation, chasing them to bathrooms and yelling at them, recording them on cameras, or even reporting them to police or security guards, etc. This is going to hurt them. But in this case, perhaps more importantly, non-binary trans people will almost certainly be excluded from spaces where room is in high demand, as now companies are required to have both male and female bathrooms, so having a third gender-neutral bathroom as well will be viewed as an expensive addition. It will be viewed as a luxury. So it will force a lot of non-binary people into a situation where they have to go into one of these gendered bathrooms. As businesses, again, they're all about the profit. If they can save room by not having a third bathroom, they're going to save room by not having a third bathroom. That's what's going to happen. And it is going to be the non-binary people who are going to be excluded. And then if they have to go into either bathroom, if they look androgynous at all, that is also going to lead to them being targeted in the same way as binary trans people. So the whole thing is just absolutely horrific, and it's a fucking travesty that the government is still fucking pretending like this isn't about targeting trans people when everything they seem to do these days seems to be about targeting trans people. So I don't know if you have anything to add. Sorry, I realised.
I do, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. Okay, so going back to cis people, and my friend is calling me out for responding. You messaged me. You messaged me on Discord, and I respond, and then you yell at me because I'm streaming. Why? Why are you like this? Sorry. I keep forgetting to put my Discord on Do Not Disturb, but then also sometimes people message me about the stream on Discord during the stream, so I can't do that anyway. But anyway, yes. Back to cis people. I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying that we shouldn't care about trans people or anything, because obviously we should. But there's the issue of cis people who are gender non-conforming being harassed because they're mistaken for being trans. But then there are also cis people who maybe aren't gender non-conforming at all and dress exactly the way a good man or woman should, but just happen to look androgynous. Some people just look like really, really, really androgynous no matter what they do. And unlike the people who are just gender non-conforming, where you would be wrong, but you could argue, oh, they can just dress differently, they shouldn't have to. I feel like that's an argument you can make. With the people who naturally just look androgynous, there's nothing they can do. They're just completely fucked. And they just have to deal with constant harassment because of how they physically look, and they're just stuck with it. And if you feel sympathy for those people, then congratulations. You know how trans people are feeling and what we have to deal with. So yeah, that's why you should care about how this impacts cis people, but also how it impacts trans people, because it's literally the exact same thing. It's just you're like this, and now you're screwed forever for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, like we bring it up because yeah, the fact that it hurts trans people should be enough, but sadly we don't live in that idyllic world. It's just like we pointed out that in 2019 that if about the whole sports thing, like if trans people were barred from sports, intersex, people of color, like the gender non-conforming, all of them are going to be hurt by this. And what happens? Oh, we have now bills being passed which allow, members of the other team to challenge the gender or someone they're opposing, which will result in that student being sexually assaulted. There's no way this ends good for anyone, except for the bigots. So
The other thing I want to talk about, because I have to have a word rant in here somewhere, is it has been a while since I read over this provision, but I do remember that there was a lot of talk about how this is for the well-being of women, that women need extra consideration for toilets because they're at a disadvantage or vulnerable in whatever respect compared to men, because of things like menstruation. I think pregnancy was one. Not being able to use urinals means it just takes longer, and women's bathrooms at full capacity don't work as quickly, aren't as efficient as men's. Uh, and this links back to the whole thing we're talking about with the last story of how women, the whole thing of saying trans inclusion is bad because women feel erased and don't like it, and now they're saying trans inclusion is bad because trans inclusive bathrooms are harmful to women somehow. It's that same weaponizing of women by presenting them as vulnerable.
The fun thing is, like, all of the polls that the government has done on this to try and prove that cis women are scared of trans people have proven that cis women overwhelmingly support trans access, and that they support it more than men. Men are the one with the big issue.
And I guess if we want to connect this back to the other story, there was that whole discussion about property crimes. And when you hear all the men saying, if a trans person would use the bathroom with my daughter, it's that.
Yeah.
I might not be able. I can't point to any specific thing where it's like this is concrete proof, but like, come on, it's that.
Yeah. What the expression, like, cis guys say, they're coming for our, they're coming for our women, they're coming for our children.
Yeah. Our women, our children. The Graceful Gamer says, throw back to the time I got told to just not use a bathroom because someone got mad at me for using the gender I was assigned at birth's bathroom.
It's like
that was also why they had. That was also why they had a UTI. That's the thing. I was gonna, in passing, just say these sorts of bathroom laws kind of make me feel like I'm between a rock and a hard place. Luckily, I'm not in the UK, but like the idea of that makes me feel like I'm in between a rock and a hard place because with tea and everything, if I go into the women's bathroom, I'm going to scare a whole lot of people. If I go into the men's bathroom, that's illegal.
Yeah.
But even trans masc people who haven't transitioned are apparently completely screwed. Just even when they're not presenting masc, just completely screwed. I
had a point, but it slipped from my mind.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I lost your point with my rambling.
That's not fair. It's, Scheiße. So is there anything else that you'd like to add? Any last thoughts?
I mean, basically, just whenever someone makes an argument against trans people, talking about how cis women are worse off, just don't listen to them. It's using cis women as a chess piece.
I remember what it was. And again, like, people might point out, the children thing's just possessive because, like, children are often viewed as property, but that's not true. And do you know how I know that's not true? The argument is, if we allow trans women in women's bathrooms, then predators will have access to our children. But if they can't go in the women's bathrooms, if they're forced to go in the men's bathrooms, they're still going to have access to your boys. But that doesn't matter. It's only about the girls.
Yeah.
So, like, if you want,
girls are absolutely treated as property. I know I never shut up about this, but I grew up being treated.
About it.
Admittedly, this was just my brother being kind of weird. But the thing is, he didn't get the idea from nowhere. He got the idea at least partly from TV shows like The Big Bang Theory, where they have that one episode where the big brother treats his younger sisters like sexual property, and it's like, I get to tell you who you can have kids with and stuff. And because of that, growing up, I was treated like sexual and reproductive property. My brother wasn't, who was also younger than this brother, but I was. So it's so gross the way girls are treated as property and something to protect. And it's not even if you're naive about misogyny, you might think, oh, they just view girls as more vulnerable. I mean, it's silly because when you're talking about children, they're equally vulnerable. There's not even the whole rubbish of boys are stronger than girls yet. But it's not they're vulnerable. It's not we don't want them to be traumatized. It's not anything like that. It's this person has access to my sexual property.
Yeah.
That's all that it is.
You know, and
And
Anyway.
like honestly, when you take that into account, it's the people who are making this argument. We need to protect our children. They're the predators.
yeah,
They're the ones treating children like sexual property. Do not fall for this. This is literally predators projecting onto other people so that you will accept them just openly treating children like sexual property.
and it's been interesting how there's been
Girls
like,
being Seth K. Girls being treated as property overlaps a lot with losing our daughters and losing our lesbians rhetoric. Absolutely, it does.
I
Yes.
was going to mention that, like the whole gender critical. It's been interesting how like there's come out a series of like allegations of like assault and like extortion, all that against various gender criticals, because like we've seen this pattern behavior of where they've been showing like photos of fucking teenage trans men like before transition, and like talking about how they're a lost sexual experience.
Yeah.
Because that's what it all boils down to, in the same way that a cis guy will talk about a lesbian as like a lost sexual experience, a waste. It is the same fucking horrific shit. So
Yeah.
I don't want to give the impression that like men are the only one. That's why I'm bringing up the gender critical crowd. Like men are the only abusers out there. Yeah, there are plenty of women out there, but there is like a big systemic difference as well. In the whole way that the whole possessiveness of men over the women and girls is like normalized. It's not even normalized. It's often seen as virtuous in many circles. So
Yeah. And one thing I do want to add also that we talked about, it's quite a side tangent, and at one point I do really need to make a video on this whole thing. But I feel like in the queer community and the trans community, there's a tendency to act like trans men and trans masculine non-binary folk don't have a right to speak on sexual abuse because they're men, they don't understand it. And I feel like it's a tendency to preference the perspectives of trans women over those of trans men, even when specifically talking about misogynistic childhood sexual abuse. And like, this is an illustration of why it's very important not to ignore trans men's experiences and opinions on this. It is counterintuitive when you're used to not listening to men because they have nothing but a value to say and are just trying to control the conversation. It's very important to realize that a lot of trans men do have a lot of experience with all kinds of very insidious sexual violence as a result of being perceived as female growing up. And also the trans men, as with the situation of gender criticals, also experience a lot of sexual violence from them, the whole lost lesbians thing.